Well, I don't know if you're like me, but if you listen to that text as you go along, I cringe as I hear these words from Jesus. They're not exactly the most comforting words. I mean, the story begins, and it begins with words that we find interesting. Luke says, when the days drew near for Jesus to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. That's important. Before the story begins, we know that Jesus has made a decision in his life. He is going to 110% follow the will of God. He will let nothing or no one get in his way. And he is heading to Jerusalem because he does know that to fulfill the will of God, he must go there, he must be arrested, he must be persecuted, and he must be crucified. He has determined that to fulfill the will of God, he must give his whole life to God and God's ways. He sets his face to Jerusalem. So Luke tells us that this is what's going on, and Jesus now is on his way to Jerusalem, and he has already sent his disciples out. They've been working with him. He has sent them out on mission. They've come back, and now they're on their way to Jerusalem. And it'll take them a while to get there, but he sends some of the disciples ahead of him to kind of prepare the villages that they're going to go through to let them know he's coming. And one of the villages is a Samaritan village, because he's been up north, and he must travel down to Jerusalem. He must go through the area of Samaria. And what do we know about the Samaritans? The Jews and the Samaritans don't get along, do they? They haven't gotten along for centuries. So Jesus goes into the town, and he's rejected. Now, this part doesn't really bother me that they rejected Jesus or wouldn't follow him. I mean, we know they don't get along, the Jews and the Samaritans. And one of the big issues that they have around there's a lot of it, but one of the big issues is where is it that we are called to go to as the holy place, to worship. For the Jews, it's Jerusalem. For the Samaritans, it's Mount Gerizim. And Jesus has made it known that he's going to Jerusalem. So the thinking is most likely, well, he ain't going for us. We're Samaritans. If he was heading to Mount Gerizim, we'd welcome him. But he's not. He's going to Jerusalem. So it doesn't surprise me that they rejected him. They haven't come to realize that in doing what he's about to do, he is offering salvation to all humankind, not just the Jews. So that part doesn't make me cringe. What makes me cringe in that first part of the story is James and John's response to the rejection. Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? A little over the top, don't you think? Really? James and John, these are two of the three that had just come down not many days before this from the mountain with Jesus and witnessed him being transfigured. They understand, they should understand that he is about salvation and forgiveness and peace and not judgment and condemnation. And what do they want to do? They want to bring down fire to consume the people of this Samaritan village. Well, the good news is Jesus says no. The good news is Jesus doesn't reject the Samaritans. He does reject the potential actions of those who are chosen to follow him, James and John. They should have known better, but they didn't. So Jesus leaves there, which is the message we hear, and we'll hear again here next week, about when you're rejected, just move on. Now, the rest of the story seems to get pretty good, because Jesus is going to Jerusalem. He's looking for more followers. And one of the first things we hear is as he leaves this place, as he's going along, someone says, Lord, I'll follow you. Now, being an old salesman, which is what I did in previous life, I categorize Jesus as one of those salespeople that's not a very good closer. I mean, if you're a salesperson and you've done this, you know when somebody says, I'm ready to buy, you shut up, you hand them the piece of paper, they sign it, and you give them what they want and you leave. Right? You don't talk yourself out of a sale. So this guy comes to Jesus and he says, I'll follow you. And what does Jesus say? Foxes have holes, birds have air, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Kind of a strange response. The guy wants to follow him, or this person wants to follow him, and Jesus says, well, just so you know, we got no place to live. We got nobody giving us any food. We don't have any food. We don't have any money. I mean, this is a whole lot of work, and, we got nothing with us. So if you follow me, that's what you're coming into. Not exactly a cheery thing to follow, is it? But that's how Jesus responds. And it doesn't get any better. Says to another, follow me. And the man says, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus says, let the dead bury their own. That makes me cringe. Really? Come on, Jesus, why do you keep rejecting these people? They want to follow you. Third says, I'll follow you, Lord. Just let me go say goodbye to my family and friends. I mean, it seems like a fair request. Hey, I'm leaving town. I'm going to be gone quite a while. Just so you know. I mean, that's not an unusual request. No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. The harsh words. Those are the things that make me cringe in this text. Jesus is rejecting those that want to follow. And I think we have to ask the question, what's going on here? And the answer lies in what it means to follow. Following Jesus isn't about what we say with our lips. It is about what we do with our lives. The Samaritans rejected Jesus because they didn't understand. They didn't know, and they had a reason because they thought there was conflict. But these folks who are following, they know the ways. They've witnessed the ways. And Jesus now is saying, if you want to follow me, it's going to take your whole life. And that's hard. Following Jesus means no more excuses. They were giving him excuses. Now you can say, well, burying your father, what would that be? Well, again, if we know that the context of the day, we understand the man's father isn't dead yet. If he was, he wouldn't have been there with Jesus. He'd have been buried already or in the process, because when one died, they were within the day, they were buried. That was the custom. So either the man's father is older, maybe he's sick and he's thinking, he might die in the future. He's trying to delay the action. Let me go back and spend some time with my family for a while. No, it's time to go now. These people weren't going back to immediately give up all they had, like we saw with Elijah, or we heard with Elijah in the text from Kings today. Elijah went back and burnt the yoke of the oxen, killed the oxen, and then cooked them and shared them with all. He literally gave up all he had, which was a lot, to follow God's ways and become a prophet. It's the same message Jesus gives his followers, right? The man comes to Jesus in Luke and he says, what must I do? And Jesus says, go and sell all you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me. That's what Elisha did. That's what Jesus is looking for in disciples. Jesus isn't looking just for anybody. Jesus is looking for folks that are willing to set their face to Jerusalem. Willing to give their lives to do the will of God. And I think when we hear those kind of things, we cringe. Because that's hard. It's much easier to say I'm a follower, but, I got a lot of commitments. And so when I get rid of those commitments, then I'll be able to do more. When my kids get older, I'll have more time to serve. And, when I pay off this bill, I'll have more money to give. And when I do this, I'll have... And Jesus says, no more excuses. Come follow me. Give me your whole life now. Doesn't mean we can't partake with family or friends or any of that, but stop giving me excuses, Jesus says, and set your face to Jerusalem. And it's hard. And I do think, and we've been talking the last couple of weeks about the Holy Spirit, and I said the Holy Spirit scares us. It does. I believe the Holy Spirit scares us because the Holy Spirit abides in us. And it is that peace of God that continues to challenge us and push us to move forward. And that scares us. It's easier to hang in the past. That's what Jesus was facing with the people that were following him. They wanted a Messiah like King David, right? What they wanted was to go back to the days of King David and King Solomon when they were a mighty nation and everybody looked to them. That's what they wanted. And instead they got Jesus. Instead of ruling with a mighty sword, ruled with the sword of God's word and love, forgiveness, mercy, and kindness. And that scared me. It scares us. We look to the past too. We look to the glory days, just as they did. That's what we want. We want it just like it used to be, but that's not what Jesus is calling us to. He's not calling us to the past. He's calling us to a future. And that's scary because we don't know what the future looks like. It doesn't look like it did before, and it never will again. But here's the beautiful part about this. When we're willing to take a step forward and go into the future with Christ, we don't go alone. Because Christ is already there, waiting for you and I to join him. The kingdom, as Jesus says, has come near. It's here. And if we put our hands to the plow and look back, we're going to miss the kingdom that's in front of us. That's what Jesus is challenging. That's how he challenged those disciples in his day, and that's how he challenges you and I. The past, it's not that it's bad. We ought to learn from it. We ought to know it. But we need to open our hearts to the future, into God's ways. We are challenged today to set our faces to Jerusalem and give our entire lives to God. And that's not easy. I get it. And for some of us, our excuses are things like, I just need to know a little more. If I finish, if I get through this Bible challenge, then I'll know the Bible. I can talk about it. Or we need more people to get this done. Or we need more money. Or we need whatever. We come up with 100 excuses. That's what we do. And Jesus says, no, you're ready now. Take a risk. Let go of the past. Let go of your need to control, or at least you're really not in control, but let go of your need to think you're in control. And allow the Holy Spirit to guide you. That's what Jesus did. I think it was at this moment that he said, I am completely letting go. And the Holy Spirit will take me where the Lord desires. And he did. And I believe with all my heart that when we do that, as individuals and as faith communities and as even larger communities, we will come to know a joy that only Christ can offer us. Because we will be part of a future that is Christ's future and not ours. It'll be what God has laid out for us and not what we think ought to be laid out for us. And I know it's scary. And I know a lot of us are afraid to fail. I know I am. Man, if I do that, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? If I speak out in the community about this, my neighbors won't like me anymore because they think I'm a Jesus freak or whatever. Jesus, don't worry about that. You are called in your brokenness to love as I have loved. We've heard that a lot lately. You are called to seek justice in an unjust world. And even at times when you feel like you're alone, you're not. Because you have been gifted with the Holy Spirit. And that Holy Spirit goes with you wherever you go. And you're going to fail. We will fail moving forward. And the good news is, Jesus says that's okay. You don't have to be perfect. Just dedicate your life in everything you do to God's ways. And the Holy Spirit will succeed. You see, it's not about us. It's about God and God's ways. May we be people that put our hand to the plow and look forward. Because this future that lays ahead of us is a future with Christ. Amen.